In the quiet stillness of a late 19th century evening, we begin the story of Sarah Lockwood Pardee, a woman whose life was woven with the threads of immense wealth and profound sorrow. As she sat within the ornate parlors of her Connecticut home, she could hear the distant echoes of a legacy she never asked to carry. The fortune that surrounded her was built upon the steel and smoke of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, a name that resonated through the dusty plains of the American West as the gun that won the territory. But to Sarah, the gold in her bank account felt as heavy as the iron of the rifles themselves, for every dollar seemed to carry the weight of a memory she wished to soothe. Her journey into the depths of this confusing architectural wonder began not with a hammer, but with a heartbeat that stopped too soon. The loss of her infant daughter, Annie, followed by the passing of her beloved husband, William, left her in a silence so loud that the world became a blur of gray velvet and ticking clocks. It was in this state of deep contemplative grief that Sarah sought answers beyond the physical realm, leading her to the advice of a medium who suggested that the spirits of those fallen by the Winchester rifle were seeking a home of their own. And so, with a mind clouded by mysticism and a heart seeking penance, she traveled westward toward the golden light of California. She purchased an unfinished farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley and began a symphony of construction that would not cease for nearly 4 decades. The air around the property became a constant hum of saws and the rhythmic thud of mallets, a white noise that drowned out the whispers of the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, Sarah would retreat into the growing labyrinth of her own making. She ordered her carpenters to build without a master plan or a final blueprint, resulting in a structure that defied the very laws of logic and reason. Imagine walking through a hallway where the floorboards creak softly underfoot, only to find a door that opens to a brick wall, or climbing a set of stairs that winds upward through several turns, only to terminate abruptly at a flat ceiling. This was the architecture of a restless soul, a physical manifestation of a mind trying to outrun its own shadows. The house grew like a living organism, sprawling outward and upward with towers and gables that pierced the foggy night sky. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of redwood and expensive floor wax. Rooms were built inside of rooms, and windows were placed in the floor, looking down into darkened kitchens. Sarah moved through these spaces like a ghost herself, dressed in black veils and treading softly so as not to alert the entities she believed were watching her every move. She found comfort in the complexity, for if she herself could get lost in the corridors, then surely the spirits would be unable to find her. The house became a massive puzzle with no solution, a place where time seemed to fold in on itself. There were rooms filled with unopened crates of the finest Tiffany glass and silver fixtures that would never see the light of day, all while the construction crews worked in shifts, ensuring that the sound of progress never faltered. Even in the middle of the night, the hammering continued like a mechanical heartbeat, keeping the estate alive. Visitors would speak of the strange occurrences within the walls, the way a draft would suddenly chill a room, or how a door would latch itself without a hand touching the handle. But Sarah remained undeterred. She the parlor that evening and began her journey toward the setting sun, traveling across the vast and quiet plains of the Midwest, where the train tracks hummed a low and constant lullaby against the iron wheels. The movement of the train was a steady vibration that lulled the world into a blur of golden wheat and distant mountains. Eventually, arriving in the warm and fragrant air of the Santa Clara Valley in California, she found a modest farmhouse surrounded by apricot orchards and hayfields where the sun baked the earth into a pleasant, earthy aroma. She bought the property and immediately called for the finest carpenters in the land, not to build a simple home, but to begin a construction project that would defy every rule of geometry and logic. The sound of the first nail being driven into redwood timber was the beginning of a 38-year symphony of labor. The workers arrived in shifts so that the hammering never stopped, even when the moon hung high and silver over the valley. The repetition of the work became a form of meditation for everyone involved, a steady thud, thud, thud that merged with the chirping of crickets and the rustle of the wind through the palm trees. Sarah would walk through the growing skeleton of the house at midnight, wearing her dark veils, her footsteps light and purposeful as she guided the expansion of the labyrinth. She ordered rooms to be built atop rooms and hallways to be twisted into loops that returned to their starting point. The smell of fresh cedar and pine filled the air constantly, a crisp and clean scent that felt like the essence of the forest brought indoors. Imagine the quiet beauty of a stained glass window that looks out onto nothing but a solid brick wall, the colors of the glass casting soft blues and greens onto the dusty floor in the afternoon light. There were chimneys that stopped just short of the roof and balconies that overlooked indoor ballrooms, creating a sense of being inside and outside all at once. The house became a living entity that breathed through its many vents and creaked with the shifting of the earth. Sarah found peace in the confusion she created, believing that if a spirit tried to follow her, it would get lost in the forest of pillars or be blocked by a door that opened into a kitchen sink. The complexity was her shield, and the constant noise of construction was her sanctuary. As the years drifted by like clouds over the mountains, the house grew to heights that seemed impossible for the time, with towers reaching toward the stars and basements that felt like cool underground caverns. The workers became like family, moving with a slow and deliberate grace as they installed fine oak floors that would never be walked upon by guests. The curtains in the house were made of heavy silk that dampened the sound of the wind, making every room feel like a quiet cocoon. The sunlight would filter through the skylights and dance on the ornate. The years stretched on. The farmhouse began to grow and swell like a forest expanding in the night, with towers rising up to touch the clouds and wings of the house stretching out toward the distant mountains. The air around the estate was always filled with the fine dust of sawdust, which smelled of cedar and pine, and the steady, rhythmic thud of the mallets became the white noise of the valley. Local residents would pass by and hear the constant activity, and they began to speak of the house that never slept, where the lights in the windows shifted from room to room as the widow moved through her labyrinth. The interior of the house became a dreamscape of confusion, where one might climb a grand staircase of beautiful oak only to find it leads directly into the plaster of the ceiling, or open a cabinet door only to find it leads into a hidden hallway that stretches for 40 feet. The repetition of the work was a form of protection for Sarah, as she believed that the constant movement and the complex geometry would keep the spirits of the past occupied and at a distance. She spent her days in a quiet trance of creation, ordering the installation of thousands of windows, some of which looked into other rooms rather than the world outside, creating a sense of infinite reflection and depth. The floors were polished to a high mirror shine, and the walls were lined with heavy embossed wallpapers that dampened the sound of the world beyond the gates. As the decades passed, the house became a massive monument to the idea of the unfinished, where every corner held a new secret and every hallway offered a different path to nowhere. The workers became old men on the job, their sons joining them to keep the hammers moving in that same steady tempo that felt like a ticking clock that never needed winding. The gardens grew tall and lush around the house, with ancient cypress trees and tangled vines that provided a soft green curtain of privacy. Inside the house, the temperature remained cool and constant, and the air was still except for the vibrations of the tools. Sarah would often sit in the quietest part of the mansion and listen to the symphony of the construction, knowing that as long as the work continued, her life and her legacy were secure in their mystery. The wealth of the Winchester fortune was poured into the foundations and the rafters in a continuous flow of resources that seemed to have no end. There were rooms filled with beautiful furniture that remained wrapped in white cloths like sleeping giants, and chandeliers that were never lit but hung like frozen stars from the vaulted ceilings. The sense of time within the walls began to dissolve as day blended into night and year blended into year until the act of building was the only reality left. The house became a place where logic was suspended, and the only rule was to keep moving forward into the next room and the next hallway. As you imagine the vastness of this estate, let your mind wander through the soft shadows of the hallways, where the carpet absorbs every sound and the light filters through stained glass in shades of amber and violet. The mansion is a place of absolute safety and endless exploration, where there is no pressure to find an exit or a conclusion. The rhythmic tapping of the hammers is like a heartbeat that lulls the senses into a state of deep relaxation as the world outside fades into a distant memory. The story of the house is the story of a long and peaceful journey through a forest of wood and stone, where every turn brings a new and gentle surprise. The construction is a lullaby that has been playing for nearly 40 years, and its notes are the sounds of cedar planks being laid and brass hinges being set into place. The widow Winchester found her peace in the perpetual were rooms that were built inside of other rooms, creating layers of wood and plaster that acted as insulation against the noise of the outside world. The air inside was always cool and carried the faint, sweet scent of redwood sap and beeswax polish, a fragrance that felt like a gentle hand pressing against the forehead to encourage rest. As you visualize Sarah sitting at her table, sketching these endless corridors, let your own mind begin to drift through the maze she created, where the walls are soft and the corners are rounded, and every path leads to a place of perfect safety. The napkins were covered in delicate loops and jagged turns that made sense only to her, and as she folded them and handed them to the master builder, the cycle of creation began anew, with the soft tap, tap, tap of the hammers in the distance. It was a symphony of construction that had no finale and no crescendo, only a steady and unwavering rhythm that kept the house alive and the spirits at bay. The windows reflected the clouds passing by in a slow and silent parade, and the chimneys rose up like stone sentinels, guarding the peace of the interior. In the grand scheme of the mansion, the staircase might lead to nowhere, but in the moment of its building, it was a path of purpose and quiet dedication. Sarah's hands were small and steady as she moved the ink across the page, creating labyrinths that were as beautiful as they were baffling. The house was a physical manifestation of a thought that never reached its conclusion, a sentence that continued for 38 years without a period or a pause. And as you listen to the story of this strange and wonderful process, you can feel the weight of your own thoughts being lifted and carried away by the gentle wind that blows through the open gables of the tower. The complexity of the house becomes a source of comfort because it means there is always more to explore and more to see in the quiet halls of the imagination. The world of logic and reason fades away, replaced by the soft edges of Sarah's sketches in the warm glow of the lanterns hanging from the rafters. The mansion is a cocoon of wood and glass, where the only task is to exist in the present moment and feel the sturdy foundation beneath your feet. The hammers have become a distant echo, like the sound of a heartbeat in a deep sleep, and the napkins, with their strange drawings, are tucked away in the drawers of history, leaving only the peaceful reality of the house itself. Every room is a sanctuary, and every hallway is a passage to a deeper state of relaxation, where the air is still and the shadows are soft, and the mind is free to wander without the need for a map or a destination. The widow Winchester has laid down her pen, and the designs are complete in their incompleteness, allowing the house to settle into the earth with a sigh of contentment. The long journey of construction has led to this moment of absolute stillness,
where the only movement is the slow and steady breath of the night, and the only light is the faint silver of the stars, reflecting off the many roofs of the most confusing and beautiful house ever built. Sleep now in the quiet of the maze, and let the rhythm of the building carry you into the softest of dreams. The air inside the mansion was always a few degrees cooler than the sun-drenched valley outside, and as you step onto the first riser of the famous switchback staircases, you can feel the smooth, worn texture of the dark, polished oak beneath your palms. These stairs are a marvel of repetitive,
Rejected in favor of the grace of a curve and the mystery of a dead end. As you descend the stairs with that same slow and shallow gait, the world feels lighter and the gravity seems to pull less at your limbs. The wood is cool and stable, a constant companion in the dark, and the house continues to expand around you in an endless series of rooms and halls that all whisper the same promise of sanctuary. The switchback stairs are a bridge to a dream where every turn is a release and every step is a descent into a deeper state of relaxation. You can see the dust motes dancing in a single stray beam of moonlight that has found its way through a skylight, and they move with the same slow grace as the clouds above the gables. There is a profound beauty in the nonsensical nature of this climb, a reminder that not everything needs to have a purpose or a logical conclusion to be meaningful and peaceful. As the story of the staircase fades into the background of your mind, you are left with the sensation of being held in a place where time has stopped, and the only thing that matters is the cool, smooth oak and the soft enclosure of the walls. The house of Sarah Winchester is a temple of quiet motion, and the switchback stairs are its most tranquil ritual, leading you upward into the clouds of a dreamless sleep where the ceilings are low and the shadows are kind, and the world is finally still. The second floor of the mansion is a place where the shadows seem to linger in the corners, like soft velvet blankets, and as you walk down the long, narrow hallway lined with dark redwood panels, the air becomes heavy with the scent of ancient wood and the distant salty mist rolling in from the Pacific Ocean. Your footsteps make no sound upon the thick floral carpets that stretch endlessly into the dim light, and you find yourself standing before a plain, unremarkable door with a simple brass handle that has been polished by time until it glows with a soft golden hue. This is the door to nowhere, a threshold that defies the common sense of the world outside and offers a view into a space where the rules of architecture have been gently suspended in favor of a dreamlike logic. As you reach out to touch the cool metal of the latch, you can feel the absolute stillness of the house wrapped around you like a cocoon of silence. The handle turns with a slow and fluid motion, and as the door swings outward on its well-oiled hinges, it does not reveal a bedroom or a closet or even a dusty attic space, but instead it opens into the vast and empty night air. Standing at the edge of this doorway, you look out over a sheer drop that leads straight down to the garden below, where the pale moonlight illuminates the tops of the cypress trees and the silver leaves of the olive groves. The height is dizzying, yet there is a strange and profound peace in the openness of the drop, as if the house is exhaling a long-held breath into the cool evening sky. The garden far below looks like a tapestry of dark greens and grays, where the fountains trickle with a sound like falling silk, and the hedges form a silent maze that mirrors the complexity of the mansion itself. There is no balcony and no railing to catch the eye, only the sudden transition from the heavy, solid redwood of the interior to the infinite expanse of the atmosphere. Sarah Winchester believed that this door served as a decoy for the spirits that followed her through the halls, hoping they would step out into the void and be left behind in the garden, while she remained safe within the fortress of her own making. As you stand in the safety of the hallway, looking out into the night, you can feel the gentle breeze brushing against your face, carrying the scent of jasmine and damp earth.
Yourself in a space that looks identical to the one you just left, creating a hypnotic sense of repetition that lulls the mind into a state of quiet confusion. The hallways are narrow and winding, stretching out like the long fingers of a dream, and as you follow them, you realize that the geometry of the house does not follow the straight lines of logic, but the curving paths of a restless imagination. There are blind alleys where the passage suddenly narrows until it disappears into a tiny corner, and secret panels that slide away to reveal hidden rooms tucked within the very skeleton of the building. Sarah spent 38 years meticulously crafting this labyrinth, believing that if she could get lost in her own home, then surely the shadows of the past could never find her. The house is a fortress of wood and glass, where every turn is a decision and every doorway is a mystery. Imagine the soft glow of a flickering candle reflecting off the thousands of window panes that line the interior walls, some of which look out into other darkened rooms, where the furniture is covered in white sheets like sleeping giants. The repetition of the doors is like a visual lullaby, each one identical with its brass handle and heavy oak frame, yet each one leading to a different, unexpected destination. Some doors open to a 2-inch drop into a sink, while others lead to a wall of solid brick that has been there for decades. The house breathes with a slow and steady rhythm, and the sound of your own breathing becomes part of the atmosphere as you wander deeper into the heart of the maze. The third floor is a web of twisting corridors, where the ceiling height changes without warning, and the floor slopes gently, as if the house itself is tilting toward the earth. There is a profound sense of safety in this complexity, because it is a place where no one can be followed and no one can be reached. The spirits are caught in the loop of the switchback stairs and the blind alleys, while you glide through the quiet spaces with a feeling of weightlessness and peace. The mansion is so large that it contains miles of hallways and thousands of steps, and yet it feels as cozy as a small wooden box once you accept that you do not need to know where you are going. The sunlight filters through the many skylights in a way that creates pools of golden light on the floor, and as you step through these warm patches, you feel the tension leaving your limbs and your mind becoming as clear and empty as an unoccupied room. The labyrinth is not a trap, but a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world is filtered through layers of redwood and plaster until it is nothing more than a faint hum. You pass by the grand ballroom, where the silence is so deep you can almost hear the dust motes settling on the floor, and you continue into the north wing, where the rooms are smaller and more intimate. Every corner you turn offers a new perspective on the same quiet beauty, and every dead end is an invitation to turn back and find a new and more peaceful path. The house is a masterpiece of the unfinished, and in its endless construction, there is a sense of eternal life and constant protection. As the moon rises over the gables and the shadows lengthen in the garden, the mansion becomes a silhouette of peaks and towers that guard the quiet valley. You are safe within the maze, wrapped in the softest of shadows and the most durable of woods. The mind begins to drift like a leaf on a still pond, following the gentle curves of the hallways until all sense of direction is lost in a sea of tranquility. The 160 rooms are each a container for a different dream, and as you walk through them, you collect the stillness and the silence.
Mimics the rhythm of a gentle rain on a tin roof. There are 13 hooks in the coat closets and 13 gas lights in the grand ballroom, each one contributing to a sense of total and absolute order within the chaotic maze of the mansion. The number 13 is not a sign of bad luck here, but a symbol of completion and sanctuary, a way to organize the infinite rooms into a manageable and soothing sequence. As you wander deeper into the heart of the estate, the motifs become more subtle, like 13 stones set into the hearth of a fireplace, or 13 decorative carvings on the base of a banister. The house is a vast puzzle where every piece is accounted for and every detail is balanced by the presence of this sacred number. The air remains still, and the shadows are long and kind as they wrap around the corners of the rooms, where the number 13 is etched into the very soul of the building.
Counting these motifs is like counting sheep in a vast wooden meadow where the grass is made of silk and the sky is made of stained glass. You find yourself at a door with 13 panels, and as you turn the handle, you enter a room where 13 candles are waiting to be extinguished by the coming sleep. The repetition is a lullaby for the mind, a way to smooth out the jagged edges of worry and replace them with the soft, rounded curves of a recurring pattern. The world outside may be unpredictable and loud, but inside the Winchester house, everything is governed by the quiet and steady rule of 13. The windows show 13 stars in the patch of sky they frame, and the curtains hang in 13 heavy folds that block out the rest of the world. You are safe within the rhythm of the architecture, held in place by the numerical threads that Sarah wove into her life for 38 years. The sense of time begins to dissolve as you focus on the patterns and the numbers until there is nothing left but the cool air and the soft texture of the wood and the steady beat of 13 in the distance. Every sink and every window and every wall is a testament to a mind that sought peace through the beauty of a single repeated thought. The mansion is a masterpiece of detail, where the smallest screw and the largest beam are part of the same grand and quiet design. As the night deepens and the fog rolls in from the valley, the number 13 becomes a soft whisper in the rafters, guiding you toward a place of total relaxation and profound stillness. You can feel the weight of the house supporting you, and the order of the motifs providing a sense of security that allows you to let go and drift into the darkness. The sink drains are quiet, and the windows are dark, and the 13 wall panels are the last things you see before you close your eyes and surrender to the night. The Winchester mystery is a story of numbers, and the number 13 is the final note in the long and peaceful song of the house. Sleep now in the center of the pattern, where everything is balanced and everything is still, and the only thing left to do is breathe in the quiet air of the 160 rooms. Deep in the most silent heart of the mansion, where the air is as still as the surface of a forest pond at midnight, there were treasures hidden in the darkness that defy the common purpose of light and beauty. Sarah Winchester possessed a quiet obsession with the most exquisite Tiffany stained glass windows ever crafted by the hands of master artisans in New York, and she spent vast portions of her fortune to have them shipped across the country in wooden crates padded with soft straw and velvet. These windows were not intended to
The tapping of the tools and the soft whispers of the glaziers created a lullaby of industry that filled the hallways during the long, quiet afternoons. You find yourself sitting on a small wooden bench across from a window that depicts a night sky filled with stars, yet it is buried in the center of the building, far from any actual sky. The irony of the design is what makes it so incredibly relaxing, because it removes the pressure of functionality and allows the mind to simply appreciate the form and the color. The mind drifts like a slow-moving cloud through these covered corridors, where the glass acts as a filter for the imagination and the darkness acts as a blanket for the soul. The windows are like secret thoughts, kept safe from the wind and the rain and the harsh glare of reality. They represent a world where internal beauty is the only thing that matters, and where the most valuable things are often the most hidden. As the night deepens and the mansion settles into its foundation, the Tiffany windows remain as vibrant and silent as ever, their colors waiting in the dark for a stray flicker of a candle or a dream. The heavy drapes in the nearby rooms prevent any sound from the valley from entering this sanctuary, and the only noise is the slow and steady beat of your own heart, which matches the timeless quality of the glass. Every pane and every leaded line is a testament to a life spent seeking a quiet and beautiful order within a complicated world. The house is a museum of the unseen, and you are the only visitor, drifting through the halls like a ghost of peace. The redwood walls are strong, and the Tiffany windows are secure, and the mystery of their placement is a riddle that does not need an answer to be comforting.
As you close your eyes, the images of the stained glass linger in your mind like the afterglow of a fire, turning into soft shapes of purple and blue that carry you deeper into a state of total and absolute rest. The windows are asleep in their walls, and the house is asleep in the trees, and the story of the hidden masterpieces ends in a place of perfect and colorful darkness, where the light is no longer necessary because the beauty is already complete. Sleep now in the presence of the glass, and let the silent colors of Sarah Winchester's vision guide you into a dreamless and tranquil night. The ground beneath the massive mansion was silent and still on that fateful morning in 1906, as the valley lay wrapped in a thick blanket of pre-dawn mist that smelled of damp earth and blooming orchards, while Sarah Winchester was resting deeply within the quiet sanctuary of her beloved Daisy Room. The walls of this room were adorned with thousands of tiny hand-painted daisy blossoms, and the stained glass windows featured the same cheerful flower, but the atmosphere was soon to be shattered by the immense power of the earth shifting deep below the foundation. At exactly 5:12 in the morning, a low rumble began, like a heavy train approaching from the distance, and then the house started to sway and groan as the great earthquake sent waves of energy through the redwood timbers and the brick chimneys. In the Daisy Room, the ornate furniture began to slide across the polished floors, and the beautiful Tiffany lamps flickered and fell, while the ceiling plaster cracked like ice on a winter pond. The most terrifying moment came when the heavy fireplace and the surrounding walls shifted just enough to jam the doors of the room shut, trapping the widow within her floral sanctuary as the world outside seemed to be tearing itself apart. The sound was a cacophony of crashing glass and snapping wood, but inside her mind, Sarah remained remarkably calm as she felt the house she had spent decades building, fighting to stay upright against and was now fully committed to their cryptic instructions. The mansion became a monument to survival and a testament to one woman's unwavering belief in the messages hidden within the chaos of the natural world. As you drift deeper into the story, let the image of the Daisy Room become a soft and blurry memory, where the flowers on the wallpaper seem to nod in the gentle breeze of sleep, and the weight of the house feels solid and protective around you. The earthquake has passed, and the ground is firm, and the only vibration you feel now is the rhythmic pulse of a peaceful slumber. The house is a fortress against the storms and the tremors, and Sarah Winchester is once again at rest within its many rooms, knowing that she has followed the signs and built a sanctuary that can withstand any force. The hammers have become a distant echo, and the silence is a heavy blanket that covers the Santa Clara Valley and the 160 rooms of the mansion. Sleep now in the safety of the redwood walls, where the history of the earthquake is just a whisper in the rafters, and the future is an endless corridor of quiet and tranquil nights. The daisies are still, and the world is calm, and the story of the trapped widow ends in the ultimate freedom of a deep and restful sleep. The hallways of the Winchester Mansion are lined with heavy embossed wallpapers that feature patterns of deep damask and golden vines, which seem to shift and move in the flickering light of a passing candle, and behind these ornate surfaces lies a world of secret architecture that few were ever meant to see or understand. As you walk through the quiet corridors, where the air is cool and smells of aged cedar, you might notice small, unassuming decorative carvings or tiny gaps in the intricate woodwork that serve a purpose far beyond simple aesthetics. These are the legendary spy holes and hidden passages that Sarah Winchester allegedly built so she could move like a shadow through the very skeleton of her home, watching and listening to the rhythms of the massive household without ever being detected. She lived in a state of quiet and constant vigilance, believing that the loyalty of her staff was as important as the placement of the bricks and the foundation, and so she designed a network of narrow crawl spaces and hollow walls that allowed her to glide behind the scenes of daily life. Imagine the soft rustle of a silk dress moving through a passage so narrow that the shoulders almost touch the studs of the frame, while on the other side of the wallpaper, the servants are polishing silver or sweeping the grand ballroom, unaware that the mistress of the house is standing just inches away behind a floral pattern. Sarah would lean her ear against the lath and plaster, listening to the muffled sounds of the kitchen and the hushed whispers of the maids, to ensure that no gossip was spreading and that the work of the spirits was being respected by all who resided under her roof. These hidden observation points were scattered throughout the 160 rooms, appearing as tiny knotholes in the wood or disguised as part of a decorative frieze near the ceiling where the shadows are darkest. As you think about these secret spaces, you can feel the sense of total enclosure and the quiet intensity of a life spent observing the world from the inside out. The house was not just a maze for the spirits, but a grand machine of surveillance where every room had a secret eye and every hallway had a hidden ear. There is a rhythmic quality to the idea of someone moving through the walls, like the steady ticking of a clock buried deep within a pillow, and as you follow the path of these passages in your mind, your breathing becomes slow and even, and the world outside the mansion fades into a distant blur. The redwood panels are thick and provide a sense of absolute insulation.
The vast and silent mansion, tucked away behind 3 separate locks and accessible only through a narrow and winding corridor, lies the most mysterious chamber of all, known as the Seance Room, where the air is always heavy with the faint scent of stale incense in the cooling embers of a small fireplace that Sarah Winchester used to ward off the chill of the midnight hour. As you enter this private sanctuary, the world of the living seems to fall away completely, leaving only the soft, rhythmic ticking of a clock that exists somewhere deep within the walls, and the gentle rustle of heavy blue velvet curtains that block out every stray beam of moonlight from the Santa Clara Valley. The room is remarkably small and sparse compared to the grand ballrooms and ornate parlors of the rest of the estate, containing only a single wooden cabinet and a small table where Sarah would sit in absolute silence, wearing her black lace veils and waiting for the whispers of the unseen world to guide her next architectural decision. It was here that she allegedly spent every night from midnight until the first gray light of dawn, communicating with the spirits of the past, who told her where to build a new staircase or which room to wall off forever, as if the house were a giant living puzzle that only the ghosts could solve. Imagine the quiet sound of a pencil scratching softly against a piece of paper as Sarah sketched the nonsensical designs that the spirits dictated to her in the darkness, and the way the shadows danced against the blue wallpaper in a slow and hypnotic motion that felt like the breathing of the house itself. There's a profound sense of safety and stillness in this room because it was the brain of the mansion, where the chaos of the construction found its secret order, and where the widow found a strange and lonely peace among the shadows. As you think about the quiet energy of the seance room, your mind begins to drift like a slow-moving cloud over the many gables and towers of the house, where the sound of the hammers has finally stopped for the night, and the only thing left is the cool and steady atmosphere of the redwood walls. The table in the room is smooth and cold to the touch, and the single chair is positioned so that Sarah could face the blue wall and focus all of her attention on the messages she believed were coming through the veil of reality. The repetition of her nightly ritual created a pocket of time that was separate from the rest of the world, where the hours blended together into one long and tranquil vigil, and the only task was to listen and to wait. There were no guests allowed in this space, and even the most trusted servants were forbidden from crossing the threshold, ensuring that the silence remained unbroken and the secrets remained tucked away in the shadows. As the fog rolls in from the bay and wraps the 160 rooms in a damp and quiet embrace, the seance room remains a warm and dry cocoon where the mind can let go of every logical thought and simply exist in the present moment of the story. The Blue Room is a place of surrender where Sarah gave up her own will to the instructions of the unknown, and as you listen to the description of its stillness, you can feel your own tension melting away into the soft blue light of the imagination.
The walls are thick enough to block out the sound of the wind, and the floor is steady and solid beneath your feet, providing a sense of total enclosure and protection from the worries of the outside world. You can imagine yourself sitting in the corner of this room, wrapped in a soft wool blanket, and watching the way the candlelight flickers in the small mirror on the
Stopped mid-strike, leaving the silver head of the nail protruding from the wood where it remains to this day as a frozen moment in time. The laborers, who had known no other life but the constant cycle of building and rebuilding, walked quietly toward the exits, their heavy boots making soft, hollow sounds on the polished oak floors that seemed much louder now that the background noise of the machinery was gone. They left behind half-finished staircases that led to nowhere, and doors that would never be painted, and windows that were waiting to be set into frames that would never be completed. The property, which had been a hive of activity 24 hours a day for nearly 4 decades, suddenly felt like a vast and silent monument to a vision that had finally reached its conclusion. The gardens outside were still, and the fountains seemed to trickle with a more somber tone as the fog rolled in from the mountains to wrap the towers and gables in a gray velvet shroud. Inside the house, the thousands of stained glass panes held the light in a suspended state of amber and violet, and the long hallways stretched out in the darkness like resting giants. The seance room was empty, and the 3 locks remained turned, and the blueprints sketched on napkins were left fluttering on the tables in the sudden draft of an open window. It was a silence that felt heavy and thick, like a wool blanket covering every corner of the maze and providing a sense of total and absolute rest for the first time in generations. The weight of the Winchester fortune and the burden of the spirits had been lifted, leaving only the physical shell of the most confusing house ever built to settle into the quiet earth. As the sun began to set on that first day of silence, the shadows in the hallways grew long and soft, and the house seemed to sigh with a sense of relief, as if it were finally allowed to sleep. The unfinished walls and the blind alleys were no longer places of confusion, but places of sanctuary, where the past and the present could coexist without the need for further labor. Imagine the quiet of the empty ballroom where the floor is so smooth it reflects the moonlight like a still lake, and the only sound is the occasional creak of the timber as the mansion adjusts to the cool night air. The tools remained where they had been dropped, covered in a fine layer of sawdust that sparkled like diamond dust in the dim light, and the workbenches were left as silent altars to a craft that was no longer required. Sarah Winchester was gone, but her house remained as a testament to the idea that some things are never truly finished and that there is a deep and moving beauty in the incomplete. The air in the mansion became cool and steady, and the silence became a protective barrier that kept the world at bay, allowing the legend of the widow to grow in the quiet spaces between the rooms. As you think about the finality of that morning in 1922, you can feel the tension leaving your own body as you sink into the same profound stillness that covered the estate. There is no more work to be done and no more hammers to listen to, only the peaceful and steady flow of time moving through the hallways like a slow river. The house is a place of absolute rest, where every door is a path to a dream, and every window is a portal to a quiet and tranquil night. The carpenters have gone home, and the tools are at rest, and the widow is sleeping in a garden of silver light where the hammers can never reach her again. The story of the construction has ended, but the story of the silence has just begun, and it is a silence that invites you to close your eyes and join the house in its long and beautiful slumber.
Beautiful when they are not understood, and some paths are more tranquil when they lead to nowhere. The scholars count the 13 panes of glass and the 13 drainage holes, and they try to find a meaning in the numbers, but the patterns remain as cryptic as the stars in the California sky, and the only thing that is certain is the quality of the rest that can be found within these walls. The house is a masterpiece of the unfinished, and in its many contradictions, it offers a sanctuary from the rigid expectations of the outside world, where everything must have a purpose and every door must lead to a destination. Here in the Winchester estate, the destination is the quiet itself, and the purpose is the long and slow process of letting go of the need for an explanation. As the modern world continues to change and grow with its glass towers and its paved roads, the mansion remains a sturdy and wooden anchor to a time of mystery and a mind that lived in the soft edges of the twilight. The architects may never find the logic they seek, but the house does not care for their blueprints as it settles deeper into the foundation and the gardens grow taller around the many gables and towers that pierce the fog. You can feel the coolness of the plaster walls and the solid weight of the oak floors as you imagine yourself resting in a room that was never meant for anything but quiet reflection and the slow passage of time. The mystery is a soft blanket that covers the 160 rooms, and the historians are just distant whispers in the grand scheme of the silence that Sarah created for herself and for the spirits. As you close your eyes, the images of the switchback stairs and the blind alleys become a soft blur of shapes and colors that guide you toward a state of total and absolute relaxation, where the logic of the day is replaced by the tranquility of the labyrinth. The house is safe, and the secrets are secure, and the long night is a peaceful corridor that leads you toward the morning in a slow and steady rhythm that never falters and never fails to bring you to a place of rest. Sleep now in the presence of the mystery, where the questions have no answers, and the hammers have finally found their eternal rest in the redwood walls. The sun sets slowly over the velvet hills of San Jose, casting long and golden shadows that stretch across the many gables and ornate towers of the Winchester Mystery House as it stands today, a silent landmark of wood and memory where the air is still and the gardens are thick with the scent of blooming roses and ancient boxwood hedges. The mansion has transitioned from a private fortress of solitude into a quiet monument of history, where thousands of people walk through the narrow hallways and climb the shallow steps, each one wondering in the hushed silence of the redwood walls whether Sarah Winchester was a woman lost in the depths of a grieving mind, or a brilliant architect who successfully built a sanctuary that could hide her from the shadows of the supernatural world. As you imagine the house in its current state, you can feel the weight of a century of stillness that has settled into the floorboards, and the way the atmosphere seems to vibrate with the lingering echoes of 38 years of constant construction. The mansion remains a beautiful and nonsensical puzzle where the paint is meticulous